Hey everybody, this is Arthur Schaper, the Field Director for Mass Resistance, the international pro-family group that makes the difference. I had a great time on the B.J. Edwards program, which is broadcast out of Ohio. B.J. Edwards is one of our biggest supporters, and I am very much grateful for him. Initially, I wasn't going to spend any more time on this aspect of the interview, but I do want to continue the confrontation against corruption and evil. There was one individual named Buskman who insisted on jumping into the discussion and wanted to derail the focus away from fighting LGBT and talk about the plight of the so-called Palestinians. He brought up the issue of how the UN is reporting that the IDF is killing Palestinian children. What do I say to that? I'm really proud of how I responded to that, because that show was about mass resistance and fighting LGBT perversion. And it is wrong when somebody wants to derail a discussion so that they can push their own pet topic. But now that I'm kind of on my own time, I feel free to speak out a little more fully on this issue. That Buskman guy, his name is Martin Nichols. That is a guy who had reached out to me a number of times. He had been on a previous B.J. Edwards podcast in the commentary section, and he was bellyaching about Israel, going on and on about how Tel Aviv has the largest pride parade in the world, etc., etc. And I was willing to have a meeting of the minds with this man. I reached out to him privately. We went back and forth by phone, and then I was on his program one time. I encourage you, if he still has that interview/debate up on his Rumble channel, you'll see that much of the time he tried to prevent me from speaking. He spoke over me, he interrupted me. At one point, he shouted and said, "This is my show." That is a sign of weakness right then and there. It's the same kind of tactic that leftists use, that Joy Reid even used against Christopher Rufo when he was a guest on her program when she was on MSNBC. "This is my show." In other words, you don't get to talk if you're saying something I don't agree with. So you see, this is a common pattern that I've seen with anti-Zionists, pro-Palestinian types. There isn't a real interest in discussion. They'll say, let's debate this, and then 9 times out of 9.5, what they really want is to demagogue the issue. I had tried extensively with this guy. I had initially, he wanted to bring me back on the show a second time. I had declined. I called him back and said, okay, you know what, I'll give you another chance. But even in the phone call, he would repeatedly talk over me. There was no capacity to let me speak. There was no capacity to let me be heard, which just again affirms the point that they don't want to hear the truth. It was interesting that I had a chance finally to respond to one of his talking points on the program, and I wasn't going to let him hijack the program so he could push his agenda. And I'm really proud of the fact that I could revert it back to fighting LGBT. And it is true, Hamas is saturated with homosexuals and pederasts, the same way that the Nazi Reich is saturated with homosexuals and pederasts. And truth be told, I again encourage all of you, you've got to read the book, The Pink Swastika by Dr. Scott Lively. He documents accurately, extensively, the homosexual roots of the Nazi Party. And he points out the fundamental fascist tendencies of the LGBT movement. And you see this from Sodom and Gomorrah to the present day, as this agenda is shoved in our faces and people are punished if they won't go along with it. But now I want to speak even more fully, since this is now my time and not Mr. Edwards' podcast. The fact of the matter is that Hamas is saturated with evil. It is an ungodly, satanic, terrorist movement that targets innocent children all the time. They don't just target Israeli children. They kill their own children. They put their own children in harm's way, and I will never have concourse for that. I thought it was laughable specifically when this Buskman fellow, his real name again is Martin Nichols, he brings up the UN says. I don't care what the UN says. The UN doesn't think I have a right to own a firearm. The UN doesn't think that borders matter. The UN wants to normalize LGBT everything around the world. The UN wanted to push through a so-called Children's Bill of Rights, which would open up allowing adults to have sex with children. Yes, because one of those so-called children's rights is the right to feel pleasure or the right to engage in sexual acts. This is abhorrent. No, children do not have unlimited rights, and they should not. No natural law or common law tradition could ever tolerate such an assertion. I don't care what the UN says. Even Hamas's numbers, claiming so many children have been killed by the IDF, their own numbers have been fraudulent. They've had to retract some of their numbers. You have like the Hamas Agency of Health, the same agency and the same governing power that does put their own children in harm's way. The same governing agency that says it's okay to give up your children for jihad. There are mothers in Gaza who literally said, I will give all my children to jihad. What kind of a culture does this, where they readily sacrifice their children for terror? And it's astounding to me that there's anyone out there who would defend Hamas and condemn the IDF. The IDF never attacks children deliberately. That is a lie. Israel did not prevent foodstuffs from getting into Gaza. It is an unprecedented war effort in human history where you would see a nation that's trying to defend itself and kill the terrorists, destroy the terrorists to attack their own people as well as foreign nationals, including Americans. American citizens died on October 7th. And a lot of these anti-Zionists conveniently ignore that. But to have a country that is fighting back and they still provide the food to the children of their enemies, where do you see that in human history? Where do you see that? I am grateful for the IDF, and I think that they're not doing enough. And I don't blame them, I blame the leadership. I think that Benjamin Netanyahu needs to stop fighting this war with one arm tied behind his back. I think it's obscene that you have pro-Hamas and pro-Palestinian militants. They do the same thing that those same terrorists do. They hide behind the children. They exploit the children. They are, in the words of Mossad Youssef, they are parasites and bottom feeders who exploit children in order to defend terrorists. And that includes Mr. Buskman, who, of course, would never listen to me, because it would mean he'd have to acquiesce to the fact that he's defending evil when he defends the so-called Palestinians and their abuses of their own children. And this has to be said. And you can't debate this, because it's a deeper evil, it's a deeper confusion, it's a deeper darkness that must be rejected entirely. And the last challenge that a lot of them love to bring up, oh, Tel Aviv has the second largest gay pride parade. They do, and it's wrong. I agree, it's wrong. And in Israel, Jews and Christians are able to protest those pride parades. In the Israeli government, you have members of the Knesset who are expressly in government to stop LGBT. We don't have that in America. I wish we did. The Republican Party, you've got a handful that will speak out for natural marriage. There was a Congressman, Andy Ogles, who said homosexuality has no place in America. And then he backed off and he took down that tweet, that post. That's unfortunate. He should have kept it up. You see, we're not there yet as a country being able to say this is wrong. But in Israel, members of the political establishment, they can speak out against this, and they speak out boldly. They don't want LGBT in their country. Why don't we have that in America? And I would also say to those who have such a problem with pride in Tel Aviv, what are you doing about it in your backyard? That Buskman fellow is in Ohio. Has he done anything about the pride parades in Cincinnati or Columbus? I haven't seen anything. Mass resistance. We're doing something about all this pride crap too, by the way. We're actually doing something about it. Where's everybody else? Why do they spend so much time focusing on Israel when there's so many problems in America? Why is that? Why? It's very interesting. You see, this is a much more extensive response than even time would have permitted on Mr. Edwards' program. And I really shouldn't say I'm proud of, I should say I'm grateful. The Lord is good. He gave me the words. He will give you the words in the very hour, and he gave them to me. That I could repudiate the lie, not give attention to a disruptor, and I could restore the program back to its proper focus all at once. So God's doing a good work in me, because I've never been very good at responding to attacks and allegations and instigations on the spot, but the Lord is good. I'm getting better at it. So that's what I have to say when it comes to anti-Zionist or these pro-Palestinian disruptors. When they want to normalize perversion, they want to normalize terrorism, you have to fight back with the truth. And we have to have the courage to say this. They put terrorists ahead of Americans. They're putting terrorists ahead of law-abiding citizens. They are putting terrorists ahead of ordered liberty and natural law. And that is something I can never support. And I am on record saying this. I am grateful that the IDF exists. I think that they are a force for good in the world, not just in Israel. They fight the enemies that we don't have to fight. I'm grateful for that. And I'm glad I can say that. These are my thoughts. I'm glad that I had a chance to follow up on them fully. Thank you.